There we go. Hello and welcome to everyone tuning in to the Canadian edition of the Gerety Jury Insights Panel 2026. For those watching, my name is Jordan One Neufeld, Canada reporter at Little Black Book Online, and I'm joined today by Josephina Nadarada, co-founder and executive producer at Holiday Films, Crystal Mullen, chief creative officer at John Street, Priyanka Goswami, president at No Fixed Address, and Heather Siegel, chief strategy officer at Zulu Alpha Kilo. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to hear about your experience working with Gerety this year. And to start off, I would just love to know, what was it like being on this year's jury?
Honestly, Jordan, it might have been the best day of all of our lives.
Amazing.
It was so much fun. We truly had lightning in a bottle in a room with the group that we had. We're so lucky that all of the people that we selected, all of the all-stars from the Toronto Canadian industry, I should say, were available and were able to join us in the room. And right from the moment that we all stepped into the room, there was an energy and a vibe of creativity, of strategic thinking, of discussions around production. And I feel like at the end of the day, we really focused on the business of creativity and how ideas can take shape and move a client's brand in the right way. It was a good time.
I think what made that so successful was how the room was built, that there was such a diversity of talent and expertise that you really had almost the whole creative process represented in the room. And so everyone was being able to advocate from their expertise and really like shift the room by bringing in their unique perspective. And for me, that was just, it was so valuable, but also just so, such a great reminder of what makes this industry so powerful is that when you have this level of diverse talent in the room, that's how creativity can really thrive.
Yeah. And I think it's a good reminder for why perspective is so important because you can be so set in a point of view and then you hear someone else's perspective and it can literally shift. You're like, I never even thought about it that way. Like I didn't even have that vantage point. So, and I think that is why it's just so important to be having these conversations. It's so important to be even in your own groups. The diversity piece is so important. It's not just about race or sex or all these things. It's just different levels and different viewpoints. I think, yeah. So I totally agree, Heather. That was super, super important.
Yeah, and I also think that just having that diversity of different disciplines in the room as well, not being too judgmental as a jury. I think that was interesting because you are open to other people's opinions and you're really listening, right? We're listening to one another. We're having these amazing conversations. We're connecting. We're able to look at, like Crystal mentioned, like what is the business of creativity? Like how are we joining that creativity in commerce? And more importantly, like I found that a lot of the themes this year had so many different layers to it. Like it was just this amazing blend of, behavioral, like whether it be creating products that, went beyond, the real world infrastructures for change, those were big things and there were big ideas in the room. And so to peel back the layers of that onion, we could have spent all day there. Honestly, we had such a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
True. A lot of just different ways to like problem solve. I agree.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think from cases to cases, it was like whether it was the big idea expressed through medias in different ways. I feel like media can look a lot different for different audiences. And I think, for the lump dolls piece, it's like we wouldn't consider those media avenues in like kind of the modern like Western world, but like that is so important, like that for that challenge, the way that they approached, expressing that or in the execution, that was very different. It just looked different. It wasn't like big billboards and out of homes and whatnot. It was like small communities and getting the message out. And they just did it in such a different way. And I think we all have to be so open to those types of things. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm so glad that each of you talked about the diversity in the jury room, because I did have a question about that. As leaders with very different areas of expertise, how did you initially come into the room looking to define successful work? And would you say your opinion changed by the end of what successful work looked like, given the exposure to other perspectives?
I'll start first because for me, I come from the production side, so it's the business of really like craft and storytelling. And I found that, a lot of the executions this year were based on more like a 360 POV, like Heather said, like we had everything represented from, what the strategic intent was to, the idea to the execution being, whether it's a digital execution or whether it's, something that you're bringing into the community and creating some sort of product, that helps a community, such as the Dry Gene project, which was incredible. So there was a lot of those things that for me, I had to really lean on everybody else's opinions kind of to understand, okay, what hit in those different areas, right? With everyone's disciplines and what their expertise is. Lump dolls
Yeah.
was something that I did find, from a craft point of view, though, like, it was just told in such a beautiful cinematic documentary way, and it was like real life stories. So that did resonate with me greatly, but all the other ones were very experiential and, had a lot of impact that really required the voices of everyone in the room.
It's interesting coming in as a strategist. We're so at the start of a project, and I was excited to come into the room with people that really had an expertise of really seeing it all the way through and learning from that and sort of understanding what it takes to execute that strategy into something that is really compelling. And I was actually really quite amazed at how generous everyone was about holding space for everyone's expertise and being like, to Josephina's, like, we were all swayed as people really spoke up from their center point. I know there was a whole conversation about editing where it's like, oh, I didn't see that, and now I really appreciate what that case did. And for me, like, maybe this is just such a classic strategist thing to say, but like I definitely went in there with a learner's mindset of like, yes, I want to contribute, but I do want to learn and build new perspective. And I just felt the energy from the whole room. Like when we left, we're all like, oh my gosh, like, yes, we shared, but we all really genuinely learned. Like it just, I don't know, felt like a good day at summer camp or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, Jordan, it's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it because I think that when Joe and I were debating about pulling people into a room, it could have been really easy to just bring a bunch of labeled creative or label craft people into a room. But we made a really conscious choice to have Heather in the room, to have Pri in the room, from a strategic mindset, from a business and leadership mindset. It was so important to hear their perspectives. And I think at the end of the day, one of the things that Joe and I talked about was that no matter what your role is in our industry, because you are in the industry, you are creative. Like Pri, I'm sure when you open that Excel document to crunch the numbers, you're being
I do more
creative
than that, but
with
yeah.
those numbers. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, we're all in this industry because we love creativity and we love storytelling. And so I think a lot of juries and listen, I love, you all know how much I love creative award shows. A lot of juries are just creative people, right? They're art directors, they're writers, they're makers. I really felt like we had such a different perspective in our jury room because we widened the aperture on the type of advertising person we brought in.
Because I think like the success is not just about the creative idea, it's the surround sound of it. And so, yes, it starts with strategy and like the strategic vision and then the big idea and all of those pieces. But even that's not all happening in isolation. Like that all has to be like nurtured together. because we're not living in the times where it's like, okay, you crack the big idea and then we'll just flow down to all the other tactics. It just doesn't work that way. You have to kind of see how this idea is going to manifest through, social or through PR or through communities or through, activations or IRL or through tools or whatever. And I think that is why the creative and execution piece is so tight. And it's like that we have to sing. It has to sing. Otherwise, it's just a big creative idea that like could win a lot of awards but it's not driving results and it's not driving the impact that we need. So that was really, really important in this show.
Yeah, it was great that we also had a client in the room as well, who was also former agency.
Yeah, exactly.
To another level, Cass's opinions, landed so well with some of the things that she was bringing up, and she changed her opinions a few times, so that was helpful.
Amazing. With that in mind, obviously the shortlist for the Canadian work came out today. I'm very curious, how do you all feel about it? Do you think Canada has been well represented and there's a nice diverse swath of work included in there?
Well, I'm super excited because a piece of work from John Street got shortlisted. So I'm super jazzed about that. I think the work, I did a quick scroll of the shortlist this morning. I think the work is really, really interesting. I think that all of the juries around the world that Gerety put together have curated a really interesting, eclectic group of work. And I'm really interested to see what the executive juries, what their selects will be to rise to the top.
Brilliant. All right. And then on a local level, you've already mentioned a few of the pieces that really stood out to each of you, but would you like to go down the line and tell us a little bit more about what you liked and why it was such a highlight?
Yeah, let's do it. Who wants to start? Okay, I should start.
Sure.
No, Heather, you start.
Oh no, I was going to say
Heather, you could just talk about
I mean, there are a couple of themes that really stood out. Like I think at least what we ended up judging in Toronto, there was a lot, as Pre said, of things that really felt like they were like 360 ways of a brand attacking something in a different, unexpected way. Like one thing that really stood out to me, we were drawn to things that really felt like they were built from true consumer empathy and like serving a business need, but from the consumer out, and really truly serving that consumer rather than messaging that consumer. And I think when we move into work that is more purpose-led, sometimes we just sort of get a hashtag activism and that the objective is to drive awareness. And here we really saw these brands going all the way through to solution and really meeting people where they were at. I think that the lump dolls that Josefina talked about is so interesting at really understanding not just a consumer need for self-examination, but understanding what does it mean to communicate in a way that resonates with that culture and that community, and being able to offer it in a way that's so empathetic to that culture. And like the other side, we thought like Mercedes trucks, they did such a great job of understanding that what the job is when you are driving long haul trucks, and the risks that the risks that you have like to your skin. And so the idea of being able to go to car checkups and have a personal checkup for your whole health, it just felt like such a revolution to showcase what it means to build customer relationships. I think when you're in businesses like that, where customer relationships are so key, they can still feel so transactional, or they can still feel so surface level. And here it's really showing like a deep understanding and a deep service to your customers to be able to manage them and who they are completely, and really go to them rather than speak at them.
Yeah, I echo that, Heather. I think what's really interesting about the selection of work that whether it is the sort of business to business case, the Mercedes full checkup, which for the people listening, I would definitely recommend searching that case study and taking a look on the Gerety site, or even something like that is a total left turn, but balls for balls.
Yes.
In the health cut, which we got a big kick out in the room. I think that, and even, Volvo, the piece of work that we shortlisted for Volvo, I think what you would have heard if you were in the room with us was that we were really vibing with work that where the business or the brand served the business or the brand through their consumers. So Mercedes, like Heather was just saying, created this holistic ecosystem of having their drivers be healthy in the same way their cars are, but the cars were always, or the trucks were always the focus. The vehicles were always the focus. So I think it was really interesting that just naturally of course, we were a group of people in the room who want the world to be a better place. And so we tended toward those ideas, but they were always full of, they always checked the box of a business need being met. So it was never purpose for purpose sake. It was purpose for business sake and purpose that drove business.
But sometimes consumer empathy came in like an unexpected way, like
Yes,
the Xbox
yes.
progressive passes, where
Yeah.
just understanding the superstitions that go with sport and being able to say, you know what, we're going to give you a different solution so you don't jinx your team. Like we loved the cheekiness of really leaning hard into that insight and then having a product solution that plays off of it. Like it's just so clever. So even this type of empathy work doesn't need to manifest in like serious PSA type vibes. It can just be really fun, clever, silly solutions that still get brand connection, brand engagement.
Yeah, that's what even for like the B2B category, that Mercedes case really stood out because typically they didn't follow the typical tropes that, that B2B usually has. So it started with this like emotional story about truck. And you wouldn't even think, I would have never thought of that. That just like is never a thing that would even cross my mind that that would be a problem. But it's like you're taking care of the drivers and therefore you are taking care of the end product, which was really like a really nice, subtle story. Like it did not feel forced. It did not feel like, where they were trying to just like sell a bunch of trucks. It was this really beautiful narrative that also was there in the execution and the surround sound of it with the kits and the PR and the tests and the checkups and all the pieces. So I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I think like a big theme overall, like, just prioritizing the work where brand purpose was translated into that tangible utility. Like I think companies were using their reach, whether through products and touch points and creating like impact again, like the dry gene project, like that bit of insight of actually not washing your hands, but drying your hands,
Yeah.
providing this a towel that, has a thousand uses and, it's recyclable and it helps a community, right? That typically suffers from, you know, diarrhea.
You said it.
But
That we-
it's it just redefines what it means for a brand to like be genuinely useful in society, right? So you're thinking in all these like really thoughtful, intelligent layers, which was amazing.
It was nice that it wasn't like it was impact over like gimmicks. Like it wasn't
Yeah,
just like, oh, we're doing this to like create a case.
yeah,
It was like just for this, it felt like there was actual real world solutions to, Joe's point that like that were actually actionable and can scale like beyond this like community and that there was actual real effort being put into those things to be able to scale these solutions, which was nice and refreshing to see.
Yeah, and I think that's where like in terms of like where things would fall off in the room, where we didn't see as strong a connection. So you could see a brand trying to connect brand to purpose, but we didn't understand the real role of that business or that product in that space. And so I think that's where there becomes a gap when you don't feel like the brands understand who they are in that moment. And there were other cases where we really felt like brands really got their center point. Like I think the Volvo case that Crystal brought up is such a great example of a brand really putting another drop in the bucket in their core equity and really living that proposition of Volvo equals safety out there by having this like open source safety belt, if you will, but really showing the community that they so believe in safety that we're going to put safety belts out there for everyone to be able to use in their cars. And it just felt like we all know and appreciate that like safety belts are second nature now to us. And we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the origin story started with Volvo. And then even just like execute. For me, it was as a strategist, I was like, this is amazing. But the creative folks in the room were like, the craft of this is so beautiful too, with the seatbelt and the V. Or even like we got such a kick out of PETA really understanding where their brand was and wanting to shift and say, you know what, like things have changed, and this sort of shockvertising of the past, maybe if we want to see impact, we need to take a different page out of how we approach our brand, and bringing in this like cheekiness and whimsy in these spots really is like quite an interesting record scratch for PETA, but like very self-aware of what growth might look like in the future, and then done in such again, the craft, we had the creative folks in the room saying, okay, but they're seeing it through, and they're really fun execution too.
Yeah. And that was nice and unexpected too, right? Because like a traditional kind of organization that's probably a lot more like serious in tone and like, save the planet. Like it was so unexpected. Like I had to do a double take. I'm like, who is this? Like who is featuring this? Who's the actual brand? So that was really unexpected. And like I thought it was like a nice levity to, something that is taken pretty, again, like from a category perspective, approached traditionally very seriously. And so that was a nice, like, oh, and it catches your eye. You're like, okay, I get it. And we need that. Like, think about how much we're scrolling and like just getting inundated with. It's like you need to stand out in different ways and rely on different levers, whether that's your distinctive assets or leaning into different equities or, humor or different tones. Like, I think that's really, really important. And we saw some really great examples of that.
Brilliant. Given that you were evaluating the best of the best work in Canada, I'm curious, what sort of inspiration has each of you taken away from the work that you've seen? How will you be carrying it with you back to your respective agencies and companies?
From the production side, I think just during the brief, digging in a little bit deeper on what the brief, where it began, and how it ended up in our inbox. Because to understand, really kind of what the pain points are and what the insight is so important for the final delivery, especially in a storytelling perspective. And again, like how can we add value, right? Because there's so many other layers. So, now we're having to shoot, bigger campaigns, but also social media and behind the scenes and print and, everything under the sun. But how do you roll it into one? So it's just like, it's a really solid approach to the pitch. So it hits everybody's touch points that they need to roll out with their media.
Yeah, I would echo that actually. I would say just from the conversation, the conversation that happened throughout the day, I was sort of shaken out of this is the creative product is solely my job. It is my job 100%, but the steps that happen before and the steps that happen after are also my job. I think that's the biggest aha moment for me, was like, wow, I can affect change right from when we start right down till the end. And if you know me, which everyone on this call does, they know that I like to be involved in every step of the way. So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Heather, you're on
Heather,
mute.
you muted.
Of course. I do think because of that unique composition of the room, I just was really reminded of the codependency of our industry, that, these great ideas come to life because of the richness of the team that feeds into it. And what happens if you can see like, oh, the craft wasn't there on this one. Oh, the strategy is a bit mismatched on this one. You can see how the case falls apart. And so just this idea, we all make the work better if we all work well together, is so pivotal to creative success. Like everyone has a role, and Crystal will be there all the way through, but everyone has a really important role in making it happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like we're kind of living in a world where like architecting that attention on what we put out there is just so challenging. Like so much media to consider, so much. It's not just like we're starting with the big idea and then rolling it out into whatever. It's like you really have to be super thoughtful of how this idea gets expressed in what channels and where is it showing up? How is it showing up? Who is it showing up for? So I think being really thoughtful at those early stages and not just thinking about the idea on its own and like thinking about it in context of the execution is really, really important. And again, I think it was always a good reminder of like how we can get so like, caught in our own perspectives. And again, it's a good like it's like go wide, get more thinking in the room in those early kind of stages because that's when you need it. You need to make sure you're checking yourself on, going broad with something and that you're capturing all of those different perspectives at the outset
Amazing.
before refining. Yeah.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And then in the interest of time, because we're getting close to the end, I'm very curious, since you've been looking at all this great Canadian work, how do you feel the country's doing as a whole on the international level, creatively? Do you think this has been a vintage year?
Yeah, I mean, I think what was really interesting, and I actually was confused by this too, Jordan. We actually judge work from all around the world,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
in different categories. And so, for example, we would be seeing work that we didn't know was Canadian, and then someone had to say, "Oh, actually, my agency did this. Let me step out of the room." So we did actually see some pieces of work, but the primary grouping of work was not Canadian. And so I think that what's really interesting is we were able to put our cultural lens on things, but we had to actually also in moments stop and say, wait, are we actually understanding this from a point of culture that is not our own? Lump dolls is a perfect example of that. I think even, the single-breasted suit, which I think came out of Finland, a small country, like I think that even the results were like, oh, the results on that, they're not that high. And then someone had to remind us, Finland is actually a really small country, so these results are really impactful. So I would say that we parked some of our Canadiana in order to judge work accordingly, and then we obviously put our Canadian lens on things when and if it made sense.
Brilliant. I would just say, since we've got 1 minute left, what did the opportunity to be on the jury this year mean to each of you? That's my final question.
I can go first. I don't get invited to a lot of these creative juries, so I felt very special. And again, like I didn't, I was like, I don't know, do you guys want me? Like, is that something like, and I think like, Joe and Crystal, and they were like, no, your perspective is so important. And, it was a good, like, that's what that means to me. It's like, yeah, you're right. It is important. I'm seeing it through a different lens. I'm seeing the work, like, whether it's through a mom's lens or through more of the business side or like just connecting all of the dots because, I'm not in the strategic discipline or the creative discipline or a specific discipline. It's like you got to make sure that, the work is all rounded. So that I thought that was, it was very special and it felt really great to be considered and part of it. It was wonderful. We don't get to do that often, right? Like debate and talk things through. So it meant a lot.
Yeah.
The same. Like so happy to just be part of a group and like just such a rich, generous discussion. I just felt like everyone really wanted to help everyone get the best out of that experience, which is great. Like it wasn't a competitive room. It really was just everyone was there for a really good debate, which I love.
Mm-hmm. I was part of the jury last year, and Lucia asked if I wanted to be jury president this year, and I'm like, sure, but can Crystal come too? Because she's very experienced with these things. So I think for me, it was wonderful to be able to start at one and just put together such a talented, incredibly smart group of women together in the room. And, we debated, for days about who we would bring on. I had 25 people. I say this all the time. I had 25 people, and Crystal's like, no, it's going to be 10. And so, and I was like, okay, what about 14? So we landed on a really amazing, incredible list. And I have to say, everybody in the room and online just brought so much diversity and discussion and just smarts that, you know, we made each other better, right? And
Yeah, we really did.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
outside the room, like I think there's just some like really great things to take away from that and like do more of this, even not
Yeah.
even just through an awards show, but like we owe it to ourselves to just get out of our own little worlds and like talk it out with people.
I love
Get
that.
a different perspective. I think that's really, really important in this business. Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
was
not
so
to bring it back
special.
to the female, not to bring it back to the female thing, but you know what? Like we lift each other up and like we empower one another, you know, and like we could have probably solved a lot of problems that day had we had more time.
World problems, Joe.
Yeah, big ones.
Big ones. Yeah, I agree.
Honestly, I echo everything that everybody said, and I want to thank Lucia and Gerety and Josefina, because basically that sums up my life. Beautiful women have to invite me places so that I can get into them, and that's beautiful, smart women like Josefina are putting, you know, they're sending the elevator back down, as they say, to bring other women up. So we're so honored to have been the Toronto jury for Gerety this year. We thank everybody for tuning in and listening. And Jordan, thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. They were really inspiring and very, very thoughtful. So thank you so much for the time today. And thank you, LBB.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all for being here. It's been lovely hearing the insights, and damn, I wish I could have been in the room. It sounds like it was a lot of fun.
Next time, actually, maybe we get a journalist in the room next time. There you go.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Fun.
You never know. But anyway, yeah, thank you to everyone tuning in. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I think that's